All right. This is Kat Sturtz from rockingyourpath.com, opening up another episode of Fast Action Fridays. And I am super delighted to welcome another returnee guest from my 2014 season when we first started Fast Action Fridays, and it was just a phone call on a bridge line. Marisa Ferrera is here with us today, all the way from Colombia, South America. And we've been Facebook friends for 3-4 years now, I think, and it's been awesome. So you're going to be telling us about how to create happier, peaceful, and loving relationships with anyone. And I guess we all have somebody in our lives that just, it makes it difficult, don't they? So Marisa, tell us a little bit about yourself and bring us into that topic.
Okay, well, as you said, I deal with relationships. I'm a soul-centered coach, and when people hear that, a lot of times they automatically assume that I work with couples, because many relationship coaches do. However, what I've discovered is that the different strategies and tools that I share with people, I did start out with couples, but then I recognized that really it's across the board. These tools can help anybody, regardless of the relationship they're struggling with, whether it's their parent, a sibling, a friend, or even a coworker, because it's really based on communication skills. And I learned this the hard way myself because, like everybody else, I've had my share of relationships that didn't work out so well. And, had to learn through difficult times and through, I've been married, divorced, and really wanted to understand better how could I get along better with people and make a difference in my relationships. And now I want to share that with other people. That's great.
I know I have people in my life that if they never get close to me, I'm okay with that. I know the issues are on their end and I'm not forcing the issues. But there are other people that there always seems to be that little bit of tension that I'd really like to work out. And I know that I could use some of the skills and techniques and tips that you're going to give us back in my first marriage, because I had very trying in-laws that I was too young to understand how to communicate with. I'm not quite sure what I could have done differently, but I'm sure there's something I could have done differently. So what would you advise? What are your tips?
Well, the first tip that I always share with people, and it's one that oftentimes is difficult to accept, and that is that everyone really is doing the best that they can with the tools and the understanding that they have. And many people object to that initially because they think, well, there's no way they're doing their best because they should know better and they should this and they should that. But really, when you really think about it, even ourselves, when we get upset and we start reacting to situations, we don't really show up the way we'd like to at times, but it really is the best that we could do in those moments. Like you said, with your in-laws, it's like you didn't know how to be any different with them to be able to create a better relationship between them. So I think the more we can really step back and take a look at any relationship that you're struggling with and look at the other person, look at yourself, and have more compassion and understanding, recognizing that we really were never taught how to communicate in a way that can really be peaceful, and that in a way that we can get our needs met without, bulldozing our way, or, other people do the opposite. They just become a doormat. So, it's kind of one or the other. But we're not really taught in school how to do that. And our parents, bless them, they did the best that they could, but what did they know?
There was a hierarchy we were taught to follow.
Exactly. So I think that's the very first tip is just no matter what's going on, just remind yourself that even if it looks terrible, even if it looks like the person's being really mean and vicious and nasty, that's the best they can do in that moment with whatever's going on with them and whatever tools that they have.
Wow. That is so important to always, it's kind of like that walk in their shoes.
Exactly.
Not immediately jump to that personal, they're doing it because they want to get back at me or they're mean or whatever it is. To look beyond that, beyond the button pushing, which some people do on purpose. I've been known to do that.
Yes. But you know what, Kat, even when they do it on purpose, you push somebody's button on purpose, or you intentionally do something to get back at someone, or they intentionally do it to you, that is still the best you can do or the best they can do. And that's where it's difficult sometimes to recognize, because it's like, well, they're doing it on purpose. Yes, and that's the best they can do.
Yeah, and how do we know it's the best they can do? Because it's happening right now. It's just like our finances. How do you know you're making as much money as you can be? How are you satisfied with your finances?
Yeah.
What do you have now? Well, that's the best it can be right now because that's what it is. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. I know you've got some more great tips. What are they?
Yeah. Okay. Another one, again, and people may have heard this from other books, is to don't take what any others say personally, because it's not about you, it's about them. And that's another tough one, because when somebody's yelling at you, or not even yelling, but just saying things to you like, oh, you're this or you're that, or I can't believe you're so selfish, it's hard not to take that personal, because they are pointing a finger at you. So it's like, wow, what have I done? Why are they saying these things about me? But it's not about you. It's about where they're at. And many times things that we say or do trigger other people, and it triggers their past wounds and brings that up for them. So they're projecting what they're experiencing onto you. So one of the things I've learned to do, and it's not always easy, because again, our egos pop up really quickly when somebody starts, laying blame and accusing us of things. We want to automatically, jump back and react back and start defending ourselves. But then we end up with, back and forth, he said, she said, and it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets worse. I call it adding fuel to fire. But I do my best at whenever this is happening with me, to just in my mind, I just kind of mentally, even if the person's like lashing out at me, I'll just say in my mind, okay, this is not about me. This is not about me. This is not about me. And I even take it a step further. I actually will extend love to that person, because when I'm able to recognize it's not about me, then I'm also able to have more compassion for them and be able to recognize, wow, there's something going on with them right now. They could be in fear. It could have brought up a wound that I don't even know about, and maybe they forgot about. And so they're just projecting this all onto me. So what they really need is love in that moment. And the only times I can give that is when I accept and recognize and own that it's not about me. Because as soon as I make it about me, then I'm focused on me, and I'm starting to defend myself and starting to maybe accuse things back. And well, you did this and you did that. It just doesn't go anywhere. It really doesn't. And it takes practice, because I've known this, for a long time, many years, and I still fall into the trap of making things about me. Yeah. And that's when it hits some of my deeper wounds that I've been working on over the years. But then again, it's layers and layers. So if it hits one that I haven't quite healed completely, there's times that I'm still going to forget that tip. But it's one to keep in mind for sure.
Oh, yeah. I think we can probably all relate to that in many ways. Many conversations, the old ancestors are walking through the brain saying, ooh, mm-hmm. Knowing what I know now, I would have handled it differently then, or I hope that I would have handled it differently then. I can't change that, exactly. But I can be more aware going forward.
Absolutely.
All right. Next tip.
And this one, perhaps some people have heard about before as well. I'm not sure. And that is to stop what I call shoulding on yourself and on others. And that means to replace the word should with could. Because whenever we say to ourselves or to someone else, you should have done that, or you should do this, it really is a form of shaming. It's making yourself wrong or the other person wrong. And again, that's not going to bring you closer together with somebody. That's going to drive you further apart, because now again, they're going to jump into defending themselves. Well, I did this because of this or that. And you really move away from the whole purpose of your conversation. So if you can replace should with could, oops. Getting some feedback now. Not sure. Can you hear that?
Dennis, turn your mic off, please. Here.
Is that better now?
I just muted him.
Okay. All right. That's better. All of a sudden I started hearing myself back. So if we can replace the word should with could, it completely shifts the energy, and it helps to bring, and again, even before, I just thought of something else. Before you even say could to somebody else, it's really important to ask permission. So I didn't even have that included in my tips, but it really is important. Even before you say to somebody, well, in this situation, you could have made this choice instead of that choice. You could possibly create another problem if you don't ask permission first.
How would you ask for permission? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I say to people sometimes is I just say, regarding this situation that happened to you the other day, are you open to any feedback from me? And most people say yes. Are you open to some feedback or some suggestions on how that might have been able to work out a little better for you? And then people are more open when you've asked permission. But if I just, say, well, you know what happened that other day? Well, you could have done, well, if I started with you should have, that's, like I said, that's going to create a bomb, because they're like, But even if I say it using the word could, well, you could have done this or that, they might still hear should. Because we're so used to hearing the word should that even if we change it, people don't notice it. They still, listen and hear the word should. So the important thing is to ask permission before you ever give any feedback to anybody about anything. And you're more likely.
If they say no?
If they say no, then it's important to drop it because really it's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to deal with ourselves, with our own wounds, with our own way of communicating. And we need to respect where people are at. And they might not be ready to hear what you have to say.
And if
sorry?
Yeah. And if our intention is to have better communication, to force our opinion on something or our reflection on something isn't improving that communication in that moment.
Exactly. And one thing you can say with someone that also is very helpful is to start out by saying, my relationship with you is really important to me. And it's really important for me that we're able to communicate authentically with one another and really share what's going on, good, bad, and the ugly. And would it be okay if I shared something with you that I experienced the other day? And this is in a different situation if it's something that affected you because you want to be able to deal with it, right? Yeah. And again, if you let the person know up front that they're important to you, you want to have a really close and authentic relationship with them, you want them to feel safe speaking with you and sharing anything with you because you trust that you can work through anything. And then you ask, would it be okay if I shared, my experience of the other day? And those words, my experience, are also very powerful because if you just start saying, well, the other day when you did X, Y, or Z, I felt really hurt. That's one way of saying it. But if you say my experience of the other day is I felt hurt, the other person doesn't take it as personally either because your experience is your experience. If you tell somebody you did this or that, they'll say, no, I didn't. Right? Yeah,
their memory of what happened is different than ours. And I tell people what you remember is your reality. So It is their truth. It may not be our truth, but it is their truth.
Exactly. Yeah. But when you start with saying my experience was, nobody can tell you, well, that wasn't your experience. Your experience was your experience, right? So they might not have had the same experience, which is fine. And then they can say, well, gee, I'm sorry you felt that way because that's not what I meant, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, I kind of went around a little bit there, but asking permission is important, sharing from your experience and not shooting on yourself or others. Do your best to not shame yourself either because we're often, hardest on ourselves too.
Right.
Because remember, when I talk about relationships, the relationship with yourself is critical.
Yeah, it is. And I think we often forget that one.
Yeah.
All right. I know you have one more tip.
Actually, I've got a couple more.
Okay.
One of them is to avoid put downs and name calling. When you end up in a confrontation with someone or you're dealing with a conflict, sometimes it's hard to keep your cool because emotions, start to build up and you start to get agitated, frustrated, disappointed, hurt, whatever. And sometimes people will resort to putting other people down or calling them names. Oh, I can't believe you're so stupid. You're such an idiot, whatever. Again, that's all coming from an ego place and it's not going to resolve your situation and it's going to drive you further apart with this person that you're saying you're caring about and you want a good relationship with. So it's really important to set that aside. Again, remember they're doing their best. Don't take things personally and keep away from the put downs, name calling, yelling and screaming and just stick to the facts. What are you experiencing? What do you want? What are your needs? And make a request and ask for it.
I find that a lot of times when people resort to the name calling and some of these other tactics, what they're really doing is trying to change the topic of the conversation away from what's very emotional and they are afraid to deal with to something. They'd rather have the fight because they know it's going to take them away from having to deal with something in the moment that they're not ready to deal with.
Exactly. And maybe the wound is too deep and too painful, and they don't want to re-experience it.
Exactly. All right. Another one?
Yes, the one I saved for the end, which I feel is the most important of all, is that if you really want to have really magnificent relationships with people, it's critical that you take 100% responsibility for the quality of the relationships that you have with them. And again, this is you're not putting the blame on people, you're not pointing the finger, you're looking at yourself and how are you showing up in this relationship? Because a relationship takes two people, but the way you show up has an impact on how the other people around you show up. So even if they're not able to handle conflict in a constructive way, in a peaceful way, if you start using some of these tools that I've talked about, it will automatically shift the relationship because people are going to experience you in a different way. You're not going to be reacting to them as much as you were in the past, perhaps. If you used to do the name calling, the put downs, the blaming, and you're not doing that anymore, they're going to notice that, and it's going to shift the dynamic of that relationship. And in order to take responsibility for yourself, it's important to look at what is coming up for you when you're dealing with conflict. Because if you look at it as the other person, well, I'm feeling angry because they did this, that, or the other thing, or I'm upset because they didn't do this, that, or the other thing, then you're not looking at yourself. But if you really look at what is really underneath, why am I upset? Why am I disappointed? Why am I hurt? You'll probably find it's going to tap into a core wound. And we all have them. I mean, they're similar in many people. One of the main ones for some people is I'm not worthy. So somebody could do or not do something that triggers that part inside you that feels that you're not worthy. And so it's really important to look at what your wounds are and to take some time to work through them and with them and to recognize that you are worthy or you are intelligent. One of my core wounds of the past was I'm stupid. So if anybody said or did anything that would trigger that wound, then I would just totally blow up because I'm trying to hide that feeling that I have that I'm not competent. But once I've dealt with that, then people can say anything. They can even say you're stupid right to my face if they wanted to, and it's not going to impact me because I'm recognizing they're doing their best. It's not about me, and I can just love and not get all flustered and angry about it. But anytime you are triggered by anyone about anything, there is something going on inside of you, because it's kind of like that analogy that you probably heard that you can't squeeze orange juice out of a lemon. Whatever's in, when you squeeze the lemon, whatever's in there is going to come out. You squeeze the orange, whatever's in there is going to come out. When somebody squeezes you, whatever's in there is going to come out. So you can't blame them for putting it there. And you don't blame, it's not about blame. You don't blame yourself either. It's just there. And so if anything, we can even look at these trigger events, and I often say this, it's really a gift because it's a gateway to your own healing and growth and evolution. So, that's also what's going to be, the book that I told you about that I'm going to be publishing.
I'm going to have you explain some of that. Cindy has been putting some comments in
I didn't see
the chat. My contact information is already in the chat. Marisa's information's in there along with links to a couple of her offers. So go ahead and save that chat. Feel free to add your own. But Cindy mentioned that I should haves often runs into guilt trips and beating up on oneself, which is kind of what you just went through, Marisa, in explaining. And it seems to undermine our confidence unintentionally. Just as we hear it from others, that internal talk. Sometimes we have to separate our own talk within ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Tell us about the new book.
Yes, this is pretty exciting. This is a book. It's called Magnify Your Magnificence, Your Pathway to the Life and Relationships You Truly Desire. And this book is, it has 28 messages in it that were actually channeled through me. This is a whole other story that we probably don't have time to explain, but I do explain it in the beginning of the book. It was 3 years ago, actually. And I think on the last time I was a guest on your show, we talked about the book. And it's interesting that it's taking me a while to actually put it out there, but I am committed to launching it this month. I kept saying next month, but we're in September now. So in the next few weeks, actually, I'm in the process of finalizing the cover design and putting all the pieces in place to launch it. And it really, all the messages are about really uncovering the truth about who we are, getting to the core of who we are, powerful, magnificent co-creators, capable of really having, being, and doing all that we want. It's not, it's along the lines of law of attraction, but it goes even deeper. I can't even begin to express how profound the messages are in this book. I've gone through it myself more than once. Each message is accompanied with an exercise. So that's one of the things I love about it too, is because it's not just ideas and theory, but there's exercises that can really support us in integrating the teachings that came through. So it's pretty amazing.
And the name,
sorry?
The name again? Magnify Your Magnificence?
Yeah, that's the main title, is Magnify Your Magnificence, and the subtitle is...
I have that spelled right. My keyboard's like in the way of my, or my microphone's in the way of my keyboard. So let me see if I spelled this right. And I'm going to put that again.
That name even came to me in the middle of the night, because I asked for it, actually, because before this book came through, I was really struggling with trying to figure out what my next step was in my own life, and how was I meant to really be of service and share my gifts with the world. And I was getting really frustrated because I didn't know which way to go. And so I actually had thrown my hands in the air and said, that's it. I'm not doing anything until I get some serious guidance here. And that's when this happened. About 2 or 3 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night and the first message came through, and then they continued. So when it came time for the title, I said, okay, I'm not going to try to figure this out, because I've already tried to buy domain names and done pages and pages of brainstorming, and they're all taken. And I said, I'm not doing it. So I said, if you want a name, you got to give it to me. So yeah, I had put a notepad by my bed with a pen, because I thought, I don't want to get up to write this down. And sure enough, I don't know how long later, but I woke up with Magnify Your Magnificence, and the subtitle came later. And it's interesting, the subtitle as well, that the relationships in life you truly desire, because I learned through the book there's a big difference between what we think we desire and what our heart and soul truly desires. And that's what this book is about, getting to the core.
Wow.
Because yes, we can manifest what we think we want, but that's not what brings us the ultimate joy, peace, and happiness in our life or our relationships. So getting to the core of what you truly desire is key.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of what we might think we want compared to what our heart wants, really?
Well, that's a good one. Well, you might think that you want a brand new car. I mean, sometimes people want something that's materialistic, and you really believe that having this new car, or even having a new job or a new house, you're just going to be absolutely happy. Like that's it. That's going to give you ultimate happiness and fulfillment. And it's not that wanting and having that is a bad thing. It's not. We can have these things. We have an abundant world. But if you think that that's what's going to bring you joy, it's not. It's not. I mean, my husband is a key example. I mean, he became, I guess, successful in the world's definition of success. He had a penthouse condo. He had a business. He was making great money. He had his fancy sports car, red Stealth, and had it all. And then he realized that wasn't it. And that's actually what started his own spiritual journey. He realized, he created it all. Wonderful. And it's not that it was bad. It just wasn't what his heart and soul was really looking for.
Right. Well, we have a few minutes left. So if anyone would like to unmute themselves, and if you have a question for Marisa, or would like to share something from your own personal experience of dealing with this, I could keep you guys regaled all day long with miscommunication cues on my part, and some really good ones too, and then some that you just have to walk away from until they're ready, because you realize this is their issue and not your issue to fix, for lack of a better word. So I am actually going to unmute everybody, as long as we don't have, let me see here.
Can I talk?
Yep, you can talk. There you go.
I can always talk. One of the things that, and it was underneath a lot of what you said years ago, my late husband and I got into a you always and no, this time is different from me and whatever. And I was able to stop and say, hey, before this conversation, what happened? And he told me, and we set an agreement. And ever after that, I would catch myself, and I would often even to say to him when I heard us going into the sort of circles, hey, stop. What's really going on here? And really looking at it. And for the most part, the blah, blah, blah was about one or both of us needing to be right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's the point I tell people I work with. Just stop and check. And what's it about? And really just pause. Can we talk about it? If you're too upset to talk about it now, then just let's get back to it.
Right. I know one of the buttons that people can push with me is for someone to say, well, you just didn't understand what I said, or that's the way you took it. And it's like, communication's a two-way street. You know, maybe there was intent, and now you're just owning what the intent was in what you said. But going back to what you shared with us, Marisa, I still need to look at that. Why would they do that? You know, it's, you know, and why did I react that way? So, yeah. Do you have anything else to comment on what Sheila shared, Marisa?
Well, I think that's absolutely brilliant, what you shared, Sheila, and also when you had mentioned about agreements, and that's a whole other topic as well that's really critical in creating healthy, happy, and peaceful relationships, is to create agreements with one another. Not that are carved in stone, because you may find that they're not working anymore, but if you have agreements with each other in all different areas of your lives, then you're less likely to start triggering each other as well and doing things that the other's not expecting. So yes, thank you, Sheila.
Absolutely. Well, we are at the 11 o'clock hour here in Michigan, which means our half hour is up. We could keep on with this conversation, I know, for a while. And for some reason, I don't know why I'm not popping into the big screen. I'm glad Marisa's beautiful face is there. But this is Kat Sturtz for Rocking. Oh, Sheila, tell me.
You will be on the big screen when you're in video. We're seeing you. That's happened to me and I've experienced. We only see the other people. You are on the big screen now.
But usually it's on my screen too when I'm recording. All right. So, see, I told you Sheila's my Zoom expert. So anyway, this is Kat Sturtz from rockingyourpath.com, closing another episode of Fast Action Fridays. I have Ellen Finkelstein next week. And really looking forward to that. And I want to remind everybody, have a great week and remember to rock your unique path to success. See ya, everybody.
Thank you.